Hey everybody, welcome. This is another Canadian Psychedelic Association webinar, webcast. Thanks to, I guess there's a lot of silver linings in COVID-19, I'm hoping. Thanks to COVID-19, it kind of forced a lot of our hands on using the internet a bit more adeptly so that we can bring you great content and hopefully a happy message in face of some of the chaos that's happening in the world. And I think, in regards to the state of the world right now, a lot of people are questioning whether or not we should even be talking about anything else except the important issues that are coming to a forefront in the United States right now. And we've talked about that ourselves within this association. And we feel as though, you know what? There's a chance that the substances and the plants that we're talking about may hold at least some of the solution to what we're facing in the world right now. So we feel like it is important to come forward and talk about these subjects that we're so passionate about. So I want to thank Larry and Carlos from the Decriminalize Nature team in the United States, who have been inspirations for us and leaders for us and the Decrim initiative here in Canada. And we've got a lot to talk about, but before we do, like we do on these webinars, we want to take a moment to kind of ground ourselves and bring us into the moment and just invite all of us to come into this moment. And Salimeh Tabrizi, my dear friend and sister, she has a wonderful way of doing such things. So I'm going to pass it off to you, Salimeh. I'm going to unmute you now. Well, it looks like it is yours. Do you have headphones maybe? Yeah, cool. That's weird. It didn't do that 5 minutes ago. And it looks like we fixed the problem as long as you can hear us now.
That's perfect. How is that?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Awesome. So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Larry. And we also have Spencer with us, not on screen because we can only have 4 people. But he's with us and you'll be able to meet him soon. So let's just close our eyes and take a couple of deep breaths in. Again, as we take a moment to honor George Floyd and all of our amazing friends and allies in the United States and around the world who are showing up for justice and equality and unity on our planet. And so much of his message was around breath. I can't breathe. So in honor of him, we are going to be very mindful of our breath throughout this webinar and hopefully through the rest of our days, as that is the most important connection to source and our planet that we have. So again, taking a few deep breaths. And really bringing all of our energy in our hearts and thanking the incredible plant medicines that have been supporting so many of us in the past 5, 10, even longer for many of us years, and helping us to connect more to the beauty, to the forgiveness, to our compassion as human beings, and allowing us to further let go of our blocks to love. And ultimately, everything that we're doing in the selfless service on our planet is linked to love. And as we continue to breathe, we want to thank all of the plant medicines: ayahuasca, cannabis, Santa Maria, psilocybin, magic mushrooms, iboga, ketamine, even the other substances that are not fully from the plant sources, but from the fungi, and even the other psychedelics that have helped us. We just want to bring this energy of gratitude and the fact that we have access to these incredible teachers. And our conversation today is a lot around safe and responsible access and sovereignty of humanship for the co-creation with these incredible plants and fungi and allies. So we bring our focus back into our heart, and we give thanks to our earth and all of the ancestors and lineages that have helped us to be here in this moment.
So nice. Thank you, Salimeh. And yeah, thanks, Larry and Carlos. It's so nice to have you here. We had a really great chat, I think about a month ago, and you were kind enough to kind of speak to Salimeh and I about the Decriminalize initiatives that we've got going here in Canada. For those of you that don't know, we've got a federal e-petition underway in Canada with well over 7,000 signatures on it now. And that petition will be read in the House of Commons when the House opens up. The petition is open till August 16th. So if you go to decriminalizenature.ca, you will be able to sign that petition. Please share that petition. It's really about getting everybody you know to sign it at this point. And we've, through some of the counsel we got from Larry and Carlos, we've put together a website that really does a lot to educate. So for people who maybe want to share their love for these substances with the world and aren't quite sure how to do that, we feel we've really kind of done a lot of that work for you now through that decriminalizenature.ca website. So Larry and Carlos, thank you so much for being on here. And maybe whoever wants to go first could maybe share your story. How did you come to successfully decriminalize nature, as it were, in the city of Oakland first? And looks like a few other cities have followed suit. So I'm going to pick one of you.
You want
Carlos, you go. Carlos.
Can you hear okay?
Yeah, you
Are
sound
we good
great.
on the mic? Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to hear the story of how we actually went to council? Is that there's a long story.
maybe a bit about yourself first and how you came to appreciate these substances and plants.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. You want to go first? Or you want me to go, Larry? I'll go. Okay.
Why don't you go ahead? Yeah.
Larry and I have done this enough now where I can actually say his story and he can say my stories, but I'll tell my own this time. So I guess October 20th, 2018, I called a friend of mine and I said, I really need to have a mushroom journey. So can you find some, and then can I borrow your place? And so that day I showed up to his home and locked myself in a bedroom, and he kind of sat outside and watched, and I had a 5-gram journey and really just went in deep. It was my first time in any way engaging with mushrooms. I had been reading Michael Pollan's book. I'd been hearing a lot of Terence McKenna talks on YouTube, and the intention was to really try to understand what I was grappling with here, because I sort of reached the end of my line of trying to heal, and I had become stuck in this kind of default mode network. At the time, I just saw it more as a reactive response to trauma that I knew I was stuck in and couldn't get out of, this particular kind of response to distress or stress that was very reactionary, where I didn't feel like I was in the moment in control of my reaction. And so I wanted to get out of that. When I read Pollan's book, I realized what the default mode network was, and that I was sort of trapped in that from a bunch of childhood stuff. And so I went in that day with the intention of really opening things up. And it was 35 years in the making. Since let's say I was 48 at the time. And I'd been trying to kind of heal and figure my way through since I was 13, 14 years old. I've come from a Chicano Mexican family in the US. We had a lot of alcoholism, a lot of violence in the community, a lot of stressors. There was a lot of aggression, kind of toxic masculinity stuff, and I had been trying to get that out of my system to the point where I was able to now feel fully in control of my response to the world, and recognizing that my inability to be in control had gotten me to some situations that I preferred not to be in. And I married, children, ran a business, was successful in that way, but it took a lot of work, and even then I was still responding in ways I didn't want to. So that journey really allowed me to overcome the default mode network, to really make sense of what was happening, why I had been triggered, why these triggers were there. But beyond that, it really connected me. So that was my intention, but the actual effect was that it connected me to something really deep and spiritual, the kind of mystical experience. And from there, made me realize that there's something really powerful about the mushrooms, at least in that moment. I found community, found Larry and others in the psychedelic community of the Bay Area, and began to understand that there was a lot more than just mushrooms. There was Aya, there was San Pedro, there was peyote, there was ibogaine, a number of plants that really had strong effects in helping to reboot the system, so to speak. And it was in that moment that we all got together and talked and decided it was time to do something here locally, at least. So that's kind of the big picture.
Cool. Larry, how'd you get to that local action?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it was such a beautiful sort of synchronicity of events over the course of time, and I think that's been what's really special about all this, is just seeing how when you sort of make courageous decisions that are about goodness and healing the world, the ways just kind of open up in front of you. And I kind of feel how things have been moving for us this way, which has been really great. So my story goes back to my younger years. I came across mushrooms as well as kind of the first experiences I had. I was lucky to have somebody that really helped me view the experience as an inner experience and not as a recreational experience. So close your eyes, sit in a dark room, maybe listen to a little bit of music, and the inward experience is what you're really looking for. At the time, I was going to school at the University of Michigan, and I was studying biopsychology and cognitive science, which is what they called it before neuroscience became the term. So basically a lot of sort of what's happening in the brain and what's the mechanism for this and all that. But in all of those conversations, I wasn't hearing anything that was similar to the experiences I was having inside. And so last few semesters of my academic career, I was doing animal research to prove something that seemed provable without me having to torture rats for hours and hours every day. So I thought it was time to maybe take a little break from all that. So I started exploring a little bit more into consciousness aspect of these medicines, the healing aspect of these medicines from the inner space. I went actually to visit MAPS, had a small little office in Charlotte, North Carolina at the time in 1998. And I went there to say hello and see kind of who was doing the research out there. There wasn't really many people doing research at that time. A lot of people were hiding it behind other research, that type of thing. So I kind of took a little sabbatical. During that time, I came across ayahuasca, and that was really profound for me. And then eventually I wanted to go and actually do a little bit more in terms of academic studies on this. So I just actually graduated this semester with my PhD, looking at ayahuasca and integration for Westerners. So looking at the Western experiences, what are the archetypes, what are the types of experiences people are having, and how do we help people with that? Is it, is the therapeutic model the only way? Is a spiritual teacher maybe better? Is a support group of peers maybe better? Is there different ways to look at integration and making meaning of the experience? During that time, I've also co-founded an organization called Entheogenic Research Integration Education. We do a lot of work in terms of peer integration circles, which has been really great. We've been doing that for since 2011, so about 9 years, 10 years now. And that's been really wonderful, and helping other people support other groups across the US to also put together similar circles. Through that process, that's when I met Carlos and everybody. We're coming to the Haven, which is this beautiful place in Oakland, talk about conscious community and reciprocity. And through that conversation, we started talking about, is this possible? Could we do this here in Oakland? And, with some connections Carlos had in terms of knowing and understanding the process of sort of the political sort of landscape in Oakland, and then a bunch of people with community leaders and researchers and doctors and nurse practitioners and things like that. We were able to put a really great team together to present and really bring education to the city council members, because that was really the biggest thing, was really how do we undo all this misinformation that's been going on for a really long time. So it was really an educational process for us a lot of times. So that's my small story.
Right on. And then how did that process go once you decided to walk into City Hall and say what's up? We want to change things in a really big way. And the amazing thing to me is I happened to be in San Francisco the night that happened, because the Dosed movie that I'm featured in was showing in San Francisco that night. So the amazing thing to me about the whole process is you got unanimous support from City Council. So how'd you guys make that happen?
Yeah, it was always our intention to try to get a unanimous vote, and honestly, up until the day of, like, the moment, we didn't know we were going to be able to achieve it, because a couple of the council members were still on the fence, and they had some questions for us that they wanted answered, which we can go into in greater depth down the road. But so we really, the intention was to educate folks, was to share information, and the hope wasn't to get in there and lobby and convince them, deal make. It was really about sharing information and explaining to them what we knew about these plants, both from a personal story, in the case of many people who came out from the community, but also from the scientific perspective, from the medical perspective. We wanted to just share with them, and in that process, see if we could open them up enough to vote yes to decriminalize. And so there was a number of meetings. It was about 3 months of constant meetings. Probably every week or 2 weeks we'd have a meeting with another council member, then a follow-up meeting. We'd send follow-up emails. At that point, it really became a campaign. For about a 3-month period, it was a full-blown educational campaign. And so by the time the vote came for full city council vote the night you were here, it was we'd lined up what we thought were at least 4 of the votes we needed, and then after that we were going to try to convince them there on the floor. The council member pulled me into the back office, one of the ones that was on the fence, because he really wanted to understand why we were doing this, and that was for him very important. And he came with a couple of other council members who were part of his coalition. He represented the African American community of Oakland, which is a very strong base in his community, with the history of the war on drugs in their community, the trauma, and so his questions really were around how are you going to work to ensure that we don't have these, number one, bunch of bad trips, that we do sufficient education, and that we don't end up with a bunch of arrests associated with this. And so, he had asked us these questions. We answered them into his office. We came to council prepared to answer them. But then when he pulled me into his office, it was really because he wanted to understand our motive, and at the deepest level, because we just had we had just gone through 5 years of really difficult challenges with the cannabis industry in Oakland that's sort of been co-opted by venture capital, and so he, seeing that, didn't want the same thing to happen here, and he didn't want it to be about that. So when he asked sort of why are you doing this, and he looked at me straight in the eyes and said, why are you guys doing this? And I looked at him and I said, it's love. We're doing this for love. And it's interesting, really. I've thought a lot about it, why that's so mind-blowing to people. It should just be a very simple response, love, and then they go, okay, cool, love, right on. But it sort of blows a lot of people's minds when you say that. I think because as a society, we've grown so far away from that as a motive for so much of what we do. In policymaking, particularly. In policymaking, it tends to be more about taxation and profits, or raising taxes for city staffing, or raising taxes to provide services. But seldom do we see policymaking for love or compassion. And I think that what we've seen recently with Black Lives Matter and the marching is a shift in that direction, and saying let's be about compassion, not about this authoritarian response to things and trying to control. So when I said that to him, and he felt it was genuine, is when he said, okay, let's do this. And then that's where we got the unanimous votes.
Wow. Beautiful. And I just really appreciate that you and Larry, from the times that we've spoken and just the way that the movement has been focused from the beginning, it has been on love and it has been on nature, focused solely on those 2 pillars. So coming forward to the unanimous vote, it sounds like it happened quite fast. What did it take? Like, tell us a little bit more about how many people you had on your team. What did the meetings following that and prior to that look like? And what was the whole time frame from kind of the beginning of the idea to when that vote went through?
Larry, you want to take that?
Sure. You'll have to, I mean, you probably know some areas a little better, but let's see. It was different. See, the thing I think that was critical and key with this was really to understand that every person has a different approach. Every person has a different thing that they want to be interested in, that they're interested in. You might be able to tell somebody about how this is really helpful for opioid addiction, when somebody else might want to hear about end-of-life anxiety or veterans issues or these types of things, or how do we help traumatic experiences, all these different types of things. So really had to sort of make the team that works for the individual. So bringing people together that really could offer that information that could help be the best sort of support for their education. So so I think some meetings we had 4 or 5 people. One of the meetings we had 10 people come in, a little bit shorter of a time frame, but we really wanted to sort of represent the diversity of Oakland community that were behind this and that was really beautiful, just because you can really see that there were a lot of people who had friends that knew somebody that, I was surprised pretty quickly, thinking, okay, nobody's going to have any clue about this. And then realizing, like, wow, everyone's like 1 or 2 steps away from people that they know that had a really profound or beneficial or healing experience from this, or someone that does research, or someone's uncle or aunt or grandmother. The sponsor, Councilmember Gallo, his grandmother was a curandera from the Yaqui. So like all these really strong traditions of plant lineages and the people that we're speaking with, so they kind of were already aware of this. And sometimes, I think for myself, and I tell this to a lot of groups that are doing this, some of these, city council members are probably just waiting for somebody to ask, but unless we ask, they're not going to move it forward. So really sort of think about that in that way, that these plants have touched a lot of people in the world, and to really sort of bring it to them as if they're waiting for us to ask, and they're just ready to move because they want to take care of their community as well. I don't know if I answered that fully, but Carlos, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'll add a little bit to that.
Yeah.
The question is like, how long, how did it happen, how quickly? One of the things that we all felt early on, and we're talking about December 8, 2018, January 2019, where we sort of all met, and all of us is about a dozen people who are in the psychedelic, but mostly plant healing community of Oakland. We gathered, and that's where we decided that we wanted to pass, to push forward a Decrim Nature resolution. We were aware of what was happening in Denver with decriminalizing mushrooms, and that was inspiring. But we also wanted to take it beyond the conversation about a specific plant or fungi and really make it about nature. And as we're having these conversations, we're all getting really inspired that we're really kind of on to something. That's a deeper relationship that we have with ourselves and with nature that needs to be had. And as we're having the conversations and we're developing the resolutions, it's just feeling like there's something special happening. And now this is like January, February 2019. So then we come up with the resolution, and it's just so simple. The resolution that we created was so simple, so replicable. And that was one of the kind of elegant things about it. So when we went forward to council, it just felt like we were riding this wave. Like we would talk to people and everybody was sort of jumping in, and we'd run it by a council staff person and they'd be like, wow, that's really cool. And then it just happened quickly. So for about 2 months, January, February, we were looking for a sponsor in the council. Councilmember Gallo, who Larry mentioned, had connections with his grandmother being Yaqui. Using plants. His grandmother did not use mushrooms. So had we went in and said, hey, we're trying to decriminalize mushrooms, there might have not been that spiritual connection for him. But when it was about decriminalizing nature and plants, there was that immediate connection, and he could connect with his grandmother and history and yerba buena and working with plants when he was a child. So suddenly he's connecting at a really spiritual level that's very personal for him. And I think that was what we started to see emerge. And so from there, when he said, yes, I'll sponsor it, which is end of February, early March, then he said, okay, we're on for, I believe, May, Public Safety Committee. So then we have 2 months to organize for that Public Safety Committee. And so now it's like, hey, get the staff report in. We need to get this completed. Let's finish the resolution. So we have 2 months to finish everything, get it in. We're on public safety in May, and then we're at council 2 weeks later. So all of it at that point happened within about 3 months.
1 week later. We had 1 week.
We had 1 week from public safety to council. That's right. Thank you.
Yeah.
So it just happened really quickly, and again, the momentum was around the relationship with nature and the issue about compassion and supporting communities. So it really connected with people. One of the things that we learned in that process is that the Decrim Nature movement is really about a very special kind of energy that is emerging in the conversations. And it's bringing us back to what we say, restoring our roots, bringing us back to our roots, bringing us back to that relationship with nature, relationship with the ancestors who come from a deep relationship with nature. And that resonates with everybody, because everybody has that in their personal history. When maybe not everybody has used psychedelics in their personal history, heritage, or used mushrooms even, but we've all, in one way or another, in our ancestral lineage, used plants for healing at some level. And so that's a very easy way of communicating with elected officials, that regardless of where you're at on the political spectrum, you can connect with them. And so since then, we realize for us to really keep Decrim Nature moving and keeping this energy, we have to hold that space of really, what does this compassion and community look like? And that's what we really put a lot of effort into, and have since then as well.
It's so awesome. Thank you, guys. You've really helped, again, with our strategizing up here. Me personally, I haven't updated you in a couple of weeks, but we had a really cool meeting with a Liberal MP. So Liberals are our version of the Democrats, you could say, in Canada, and he's very pro plant medicines, and he's really on our side. His name's Nathaniel Erskine Smith, and he actually just spoke out in favor of decriminalization publicly again yesterday. But we were speaking to him about, look, this petition's going to be read. How do we win members of parliament over in the meantime? So our strategy now is we've got a spreadsheet that lists every single member of parliament in Canada along with their riding, and our mission, and this is a call to action to everybody watching this right now, our mission is to find one ally of plant medicines or decriminalizing nature within every single riding in Canada. They are going to reach out to their member of parliament to arrange a Zoom call. And then he said that it's all right for one of us from the Decrim Nature team to show up on that Zoom call. And I think what you guys just said makes so much sense, is there is a way to speak to everybody about this. Like he said to me, there's one specific conservative politician that you probably don't want to talk to. And knowing your guys' strategy, I'm like, that's the first guy I want to talk to. If we win that guy over, we win over everybody. So again, just thanks for your leadership in really finding the loving way to do this. It really is all about love, I think.
Yeah, and I think if I may just touch on one little point, I saw somebody mention this, Richard, in the chat box there, that we're not separate from nature. And I think was a really big part of our conversation as well, is that the conversation, even just saying decriminalize nature forces that. What do you mean nature's a crime? Wait, are we nature? Or, so that it really, those two words, there's so much to unpack there. And we spent quite a bit of time, although I'm sure we could spend days and hours more on this topic. But that was something we really want to touch in on. That we are nature as well, and sort of this connection is part of being a human on planet Earth.
Mm-hmm. I love it.
Yeah, and on that topic of working with more conservative, liberal, everything in between, everybody has people in their family or in their circle of friends who are struggling in some way with some deep emotional trauma, be it someone who served in the military or someone who's struggling with an opiate addiction. So it's relatable to everybody what these plants do. Or maybe they're just avid gardeners, and then in politics they're very conservative, and so they can relate at some level with the healing aspect or with the nature aspect. But and that was really the intention from the very beginning when we were making decisions about, is our movement about all, and we're not against anything, right? So that's one of the other things, is we're really about opening the conversation as broadly as possible. So while we chose to not make the conversation about psychedelics or necessarily about mushrooms, when we made those decisions, it was really, how do we have conversation with the most amount of people? Because at the end of the day, we're all struggling with our disconnection from nature. And really, at the end of the day, what that means is from ourselves, because we are nature at the deepest level.
Beautiful. Yeah. I appreciate that connection, like the focus again on the connection so much, because right now, as we're still coming to the end tail of COVID, some places doing better than others. I was watching a webinar on a wonderful doctor. His name is Dr. Zach Bush, and he talks a lot about the imbalance of our own microbiome and the imbalance of this natural ecosystem on our planet, and that viruses actually are like weeds, and they are trying to actually balance out this separation that we've had, and weeds come out when we've destroyed the balance of an ecosystem. And so viruses are a reminder for us that this balance has been destroyed and is being destroyed. So my next question for you guys is, a lot of times in the plant medicine space, yes, it's a lot around trauma, a lot around healing, and then I oftentimes think, what's next, right? How is this new energy that is coming through helping us to make better decisions on a more, let's say, environmental, economic, and social platform? So has Decriminalized Nature come into contact with scientists as well as policymakers in regards to the environmental impact, the climate change that we're facing?
Maybe I'll just do a quick little story about that, and then maybe Carlos can go ahead. I think that the changes that we're seeing are so subtle and so core to so many things. For example, there's a wonderful community in Detroit. They've been doing this work for a really long time. At one point in time, they started taking tours around Detroit to quote unquote abandoned properties. And they said, look at all the weeds there, right? But they're not weeds, they're plants. They grow out of the ground, they have names, they have qualities, they have, healing properties. So to even go into those neighborhoods and look at, lots that there's nobody on anymore and sort of redefine what we see initially as just weeds as something that's actually a big part of the ecosystem. So even those little minor changes can change the whole development of how you would look at an area. So that's kind of on the very subtle level. And I think all the way up to, most of the people, there's a paper I think that Carhart Harris did out of wherever, Imperial or whatever, it talked about nature relatedness being one of the elements that was helping with depression, these types of things. So part of that is also part of what is, we have to unpack mental health a little bit to see what is depression and is it connected more to sacredness and nature and these types of things, or our loss of connection to that. But go ahead, Carlos.
No, I thank you, Larry. Great example of that Detroit lot. And I saw that a lot when I did some teaching when I was a young person in New Haven, and took some kids from the inner city out into the wilderness. And initially, what they see is just a bunch of green, right? And then and it's a little bit daunting. And then as they get to know it, they become more intimate with it. And there's this whole process of discovery and connection developing, which is really beautiful, even if it's in an inner city lot. So now I was just going to say the answer to the question there. We do know that one of the leaders of Extinction Rebellion recently came out, for example, and spoke about her own experience with psychedelics as one of the big motivators for her to really get involved and develop and advance the cause of Extinction Rebellion. The more that we talk to people who are leading not just environmental organizations, but social justice organizations, they're doing a lot of plant healing work. And one of the things that we've discovered in Oakland is that with a lot of the leaders in the Black and brown communities who are doing social justice work and environmental justice work have a very deep connection to nature and to justice as well. But a lot of that comes from plant healing work that they're doing. And if you think about it, the level of trauma that you have to carry every day when you're trying to help people who are in the deepest throes of violence or struggle in your community, you're developing a relationship with them, and then they end up going to prison, or they get raped, or they're incarcerated, or they commit suicide. There's a lot of trauma to carry, and one of the things that we've learned is happening is that there's a lot of plant medicine work happening in areas where we otherwise didn't think it was happening. And with that, as we know, there's this expanded view that happens with plant medicine that helps us understand not just our connection to each other, but our connection to the planet, that it's all connected. The barriers, this categorization, the separation that we do in order to survive on this planet breaks down when you're in a deep mushroom journey or a deep Aya journey, and suddenly you're connected to everything. So it's a great way to find healing through the reconnection. And we're seeing it happen a lot here in Oakland, but also internationally with folks like the leader of Extinction Rebellion.
Awesome. I've got another question for you, but first I need to do a bit of a plug. As has been mentioned, we are doing this initiative here in Canada, and we've got about 60 days now to collect as many signatures as possible. So far, this has been largely volunteer funded, and the Canadian Psychedelic Association has been supporting as well. So we do have a Friends of the CPA package that if the viewer wanted to help this initiative, it's either $100 or $50. You get access to a bunch of great stuff, including access to the Spirit Plant Medicine Conference online database, as well as discounts to the Spirit Plant Medicine Conference, as well as the Psychedelic Psychotherapy Forum, which are coming up in the fall. So we try and give you at least as much value back as you're giving to us by becoming a friend of the CPA. And there is a donate button on our Decriminalize Nature website as well. So if you do feel so inclined to help us out, please do. That money goes towards advertising. We don't really have any people we're paying for this. It's really towards advertising and getting the message out there in the best way that we can. So thank you for that. And an issue that has come up, I know, in the media recently, and the last time we spoke, I really loved the answer that I heard from you, Carlos, is, there's obviously a history of working with these medicines by Indigenous communities who hold these medicines as sacred, these sacraments as sacred. And, there's been a concern that maybe peyote is being over-harvested as an example. So a request from certain groups that maybe keep peyote out of your decriminalization initiative, please. Like that's a pretty, it's an issue that requires a lot of thought and consideration. How have you guys navigated through that?
Very carefully, and with a lot of compassion and concern. So I'll tell you first about a very personal journey that I had with, I went and I did ceremony with a very new close friend and new brother, so to speak, of mine out in a tribe in Southern California. He has restarted a mushroom church on his reservation, and he did that because he was healing from the trauma of losing his father, did not find healing in the Catholic and Christian faith under which he was brought up. He went back, he sat with his brothers and sisters in various tribes, the Lakota and other tribes, Diné, and really studied their ceremonies, but then sat with mushrooms because he had, his own tribe has been using mushrooms, he says, for thousands of years in the United States. And I think that's a sort of a blind spot on the screen of some of the anthropologists, but he showed me a pictograph on a rock on his reservation where they've been for 10,000 years that actually is a mushroom. So he points to that as evidence that they've been doing it for a long time. Anyways, he sat with his ancestors, sat in ceremony and visited with his ancestors through mushrooms and began to learn how to hold his own ceremony. And now it's growing and he's becoming quite a leader and he's a very young man. Anyways, he invited me to sit with him, so I did. And I went and I sat with him. And among the many things that I learned was just the tradition that he has learned from. but also and the connection and reverence to nature that is there in the land that he's so connected to, and his tribe is so connected to. But also, what I really felt in that moment was the level of pain that is so fresh for him from having lost that connection and having to find it again. And in that moment, as I was going through that with him, the only thing that I could feel was deep love and compassion for that, because really he was mourning, in deep mourning, for the loss of ways that his ancestors had for thousands of years at the hands of the U.S. government. And so there's no question, there's no criticism, there's no critique about anything that he would do. You just have to sit with it and offer love and compassion. And then it made me realize that in my own experience as a human being, my grandmother's grandparents in Jalisco did ceremony. I don't know if it was with peyote, but I'm sure it was with various plants there in Jalisco. But my connection to the land at that level was lost in my ancestors. When I say mine, I mean my ancestral connection a few hundred years ago. And so for some people in the United States, their connection has been lost for 1,000 years, right? Particularly folks who maybe immigrated from Europe into the US, the connection has been lost for a long time. And so as we know, as we lose somebody that we love to death or whatever, there's this really deep mourning period. And the only thing you can offer people in that period is love, because they're going to struggle and be upset. But some folks are far removed from that moment, and so they're more analytical about that situation, losing something so important in your culture, or losing a loved one. So on the issue of peyote, it's complicated because of that, because you have people who are coming at and looking at nature from a very detached place, or I know detached from a place where we're not stuck in mourning, in a deep trauma still. On the other hand, you have people in Mexico who are doing peyote all the time, and they haven't stopped doing peyote for 5,000 years, right? But in the U.S., there's such trauma around the use of peyote that our approach with the Native American church and Native American community in the United States is simply to have compassion and love, because they really have been dealing with a lot of heavy stuff to lift. Whereas our relationship with folks in Mexico around peyote is that they really are our teachers, because they've never broken that relationship with peyote. And so our position is to support them all. In Mexico, they want to talk about peyote. They want to have a conversation, because the agribusinesses, the miners, development is encroaching on their territory in Mexico, their peyote territory, and they want help. So they want us to get word out, right? About conservation, and they want us to have greenhouses where we're growing peyote so it doesn't disappear. The conversation in the United States is different, because it's more recent in trauma, and so that conversation is, please don't mention peyote. It's more fear-based. We get that. We're good with that. So what we decided was that we're not going to mention peyote in our resolutions. We're going to honor their request, and without judgment, we're going to honor their request and not mention peyote and not mention Native American Church in our resolution. So we've asked groups to remove those. But with our groups in Mexico, we will work with them to get word out about their peyote reserves being under attack. And so we hope that we can also galvanize words and actions for them in support of their situation.
Beautiful. Thank you. So we've got another guest on the show, and it's looking about 1:45 right now. So I wanted to make sure that I do welcome Spencer Hawkswell on here. So Spencer is with TheraPsil, which is an initiative started by Bruce Tobin, and it is to seek permission for, I think I need to kick one of you off here, so I'm just gonna, Larry, you're the first one I see. So Larry, I'll be welcoming you back, but you'll disappear for a second. And then we'll bring Spencer in here. So I started telling Spencer's story. I'm going to let him tell his story. You've been invited now, Spencer. You should be getting the prompt. and he's accepting and connecting. So we'll see his pretty face
Hello.
here in a second. There he is. Awesome. Cool. So yeah, Bruce Tobin is a dear friend of mine. I've known him through the psychedelic medicine community for the last 5 years. We're truly brothers. We've been through intensive trainings together. So I love Bruce as much as I love anyone. And he's got this incredible initiative, and Spencer's kind of heading that up from the corporate nonprofit side of things. Maybe you could just introduce yourself a little bit, Spencer, how you came to this, and then tell us a bit about TheraPsil.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me here as well and get to talk about TheraPsil. So I guess in the same fashion that Larry and Carlos did, I'll talk about how I got into plant medicine. And that would have started back when I was about 13 years old. I was at a summer camp and saw a book called Food of the Gods by Terence McKenna. And I crushed that book, read it really quickly, and was amazed. I honestly didn't know it was real. And from that kind of point on was pretty set on learning more about it. So that's what I did. And like anyone else, or like, probably many people on this call, had quite a few experiences with psychedelics growing up through high school and university and a little bit later. And I would say at the point when I started realizing that there was healing potential is when I got more into the books that talked about its healing potential. I owe a lot of my interest to my mother, actually, who was the director of continuing complex palliative care and mental health at a hospital in Toronto. And so growing up, we always talked about problems with the way we deal with mental health, and the fact that a lot of our solutions are really just mixes of pharmacological drugs. And that's where I guess the thought that, if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So we just became a society obsessed with dosing people with drugs that weren't really helping in healing. And that's where the connection kind of built for me, and obviously for a lot of other people. So I took off 2 years ago and did a bit of traveling, and that's where I really kind of found plant medicine again. I was in India and Thailand for about a year, and obviously there were lots of experiences there that I was able to take various plant medicines. And I also got really into meditation and mindfulness. And so upon coming, actually while I was still in India, I was searching, what can I do when I go back home? And I saw Bruce Tobin. So the second I got home, I messaged Bruce Tobin and saw his initiative. And for those of you who don't know who Bruce Tobin is, he's a psychotherapist here in Vancouver Island. And after completing some training for psychedelic space holding and psychotherapy, I believe it was with Trevor, he decided to put out a Section 56 application to the government of Canada, specifically to the Minister of Health. And that application is the same application that has gotten patients in Canada access to things like cannabis and safe injection. And I thought this was brilliant. This is exactly where this should start, and it should start with people who are at end of life that have very little to lose and a lot to gain in their last bit of time. So yeah, that's kind of what brought me here out to the West Coast. I moved out in October 10 months ago, and that's when I started working with Bruce Tobin. And right about that same time, or a little bit later, we kind of knew that the application that he had put out for his team for a class of patients, and those patients were the ones that would match the Johns Hopkins inclusion criteria, and they would use the same protocol for treatment that was used at Johns Hopkins. I believe there's also a very similar study done at NYU or UCLA. And we were in conversation with the researchers there, making sure that what we were proposing and asking the government was essentially to replicate a research study, but use it in a way that helps more than just a couple patients and isn't incredibly expensive. We could use that to help dying patients in Canada. Since then, we've gotten unfortunately we were denied our request, and that's when we decided we have to change our strategy here. It seemed like Health Canada had told us that there wasn't enough evidence to suggest that this was a medical need, I think was the word they used. And at this point, we had already had many patients, many terminally ill Canadians, and many who weren't terminally ill, reaching out to us saying, hey, I want this. Can you help me? And so if they wanted us to demonstrate medical necessity and need, why not lead with the individuals who need this access? So we really held true to what has been done with cannabis, and that is putting individual patients, helping them, educating them, and supporting them on putting in their own Section 56 applications to the Minister of Health, Patty Hajdu. And that has been, as I said, effective for cannabis. It was effective for ayahuasca as well. Many people don't know this, but in Canada, Section 56 application got the Salimeh Church access to ayahuasca. And so why not psilocybin? And these are patients that have the right to die here in Canada, which is very progressive in itself too. But in between death, like medical death and treatments that aren't working, we need to have options. And a plant medicine like psilocybin is a safe and effective option for them. One that they can use with their doctor and with their psychotherapist. Because if you have the right to die, you should have the right to try. And so to this date, we've helped 4 individual patients with their applications. And so we know those are in, and there are many more that are reaching out, and we hope to help. And 2 of those very brave patients have been quite public about their story and their request to the minister. And I know that at least 2 of them have had applications out for about 8 weeks. And that's a bit ridiculous that, a Canadian would have to reach to the highest level of government in order to get access to a medicine. And, especially given their situation, just be ignored. So right now we're trying to change that. We're trying to get the attention of the Honorable Health Minister, and we would like her to respond as soon as possible to these patients, because she is the only one who can help them get this legal access to psilocybin.
Thank you. I love the point that we do allow medically assisted suicide in Canada, but don't allow people the right to try something like psilocybin mushrooms to work around the anxiety that might prevent the need for that medically assisted suicide. That's a profound point right there. So thank you so much for all your work, Spencer. What can people do to help you?
At the moment, it's really come down to getting the minister's attention. As anyone can imagine, she's certainly busy, and this is why we've been getting the help of MPs. Each one of the patients have reached out to their MPs and confirmed that their MPs are also asking the minister to respond to this. The patients have been following up, sending messages, but it seems like it has been almost ineffective messaging the government through their proposed channels. So I would suggest to anyone who would like to support these 2 patients that have become very public, Lori Brooks and Thomas Hartle, who have their stories, is to tag the minister, send her a message, if you're on Twitter, tweet at her and ask her to make a decision and not to ignore these patients, because I think that's unacceptable. So right now it's about getting heard. It's about getting Thomas and Lori's stories heard, because they're the ones here who are suffering and need a response from our health minister. So I wish I could say there was more we could do. Letters to MPs similarly helps, and I think that what you're doing here with Decriminalized Nature, that's incredibly helpful too. This would help let the government know that Canadians want liberal access to natural plant medicines. And it's certainly something that I think a lot of people find important. So why not start with 2 people who are asking for this now, with a pragmatic approach to getting it in the next couple days.
Cool, man. Well, thank you very much. I I'm going to take a few questions from the crowd here that we've got. And I just wanted, as a point of integrity, I mentioned earlier that if you buy a Friends of the CPA membership, it doesn't go towards staffing. And as a point of integrity, we have paid an administrator as well as a web developer. So I just wanted to make sure I wasn't full of crap there. So the question here for maybe Larry or Carlos is, how do we share best practices and resources to build a global community and get more into the mainstream?
What do you think, Larry?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, I just popped off for a second. Okay, I would say that what
about let's focus on the best practices first. Like when we first started talking, you told me that the reason why you didn't go to the federal level at first is it was important to make sure that we do this grow, gift, give strategy, which happens at a local level. So how, I think that's important to talk about, is we're taking this federal approach right now, and at the same time we are taking a local approach through the Canadian Psychedelic Association, trying to reach out to local communities. Could you maybe speak to the importance of what you guys are doing at the community level as far as best practices are concerned?
Yeah, I think that was kind of what I was thinking there in terms of like the idea of mainstreaming, maybe would be like everything at once, right? And I think we're really thinking about a really slow approach. It's moving really fast because the communities have been doing this for decades, thousands of years for some places. But each of those different communities that are able to make this move forward, we sort of feel that if we can localize it, we can keep it, in a small area where people then can offer the support system necessary. That if somebody has a big experience or a challenging experience or something that they need support on, there's some support systems there. One concern on a larger scale is maybe there's pockets of areas where there isn't really that much community, which although nowadays I'd be surprised actually, and I think maybe those communities exist everywhere. But I think really just to not to miss those pockets, and then somebody has a bad experience and then where they go for support or for help or those types of things. So for us in the Bay Area, we've ERIE, Anti-Genetic Research Integration Education, along with a lot of other organizations, have been offering educational information, integration support for close to 10 years now, some longer. And so that's kind of how we've been doing it here, bringing in a lot of different information, talk about best practices in terms of safe and responsible use, start small, make sure you have somebody that can sit for you, that type of thing. But also we know that everyone's different, so everyone's going to have their own approach and their own style. And for myself, I prefer to sit by myself, and other people would really like somebody to be there with them. So I think there's some flexibility in that as well to educate on all the different options, to show people the risks and the benefits of each, and then to have them kind of go with their own sort of conclusions. And I think that's what's been really beautiful too, is just acknowledging that the emergence that we're going to see is still coming. There are people doing these practices and have been doing these practices that haven't seen the light of day for a while. And now we're sort of opening the door, reducing the risk a little bit for allow these conversations to happen. So I think we didn't want to say this is the way you do it, and then find out that people have been doing it another way for really well for a long time, and then really want to be able to acknowledge and honor those different practices. So that would be one thing. So there's this mix of bringing education, bringing resources, bringing support systems, but also knowing that we're still learning this process.
If I could piggyback on that. When we talk about medicalization model, the Western medical model is relatively young, and so there is a push for a lot of study to release things via the medical model or FDA here in the US. In our approach, it's really about having the government, in this case local government and state government here in California, or local government in Oakland, protect the kinds of practices that have been happening for perhaps hundreds, if not thousands of years. And then most recently in the last, probably 100 years here locally, the different cultures have different experiences with use of plants. But it's creating a standardized set of guidelines. And these are not rules, but guidelines that say, here's how to do safe practice. And we actually published that when we did our Oakland resolution. We created a document that is an educational framework for safe plant use. And we shared that with various communities who are now passing decrim on nature resolutions in their own cities and their guidelines, because we don't know all the answers, and nobody does. We're sort of figuring this out in the Western world about how to come from the bottom up. That we're borrowing a lot of wisdom and information and knowledge from our brothers and sisters in Central and South America and Africa and other countries around the world that have been working with plants for a long time. So what really we're saying to our local government and state government is just offer legal protections. Let us figure out, again, how to do this, borrowing from knowledge and wisdom that's out there, so that we are empowering ourselves to hold space for each other, and for the individual to have agency in healing themselves, which is so important, because when you take that away from people, that's the beginning of the erosion of self-healing, is taking away agency. So we want to give that back to individuals, but those who want to practice in containers, community containers, that we enable that to happen under a set of guidelines that offer safe practice, and then the role of the city and state government, because none of them do plant work at the level of people in community, just offer legal protections. We'll figure it out from there. And we'll do our very best to ensure that it's only positive experiences, but we all know that there's going to be some tough experiences, and they're supposed to be. So we're going to learn from those, and we're going to share information with each other, city by city, across communities, and in that way we'll sort of grow as ecosystems from the bottom up and reestablish nature-based healing into our communities that have sort of forgotten how to do that in at least the last 70 years.
That's great. Thanks, guys. Next question. It's around kind of the industry development post-decriminalization and into legalization. I wrote a piece that appeared in the Psychedelic Times called "Why Psychedelics Are Not the Next Cannabis," and I made a bunch of points in there. One of them is cannabis hasn't really turned out to be the next cannabis. The cannabis publicly traded market anyway seems to be floundering quite a bit. But Carlos, you mentioned that you had a conversation similar around how do we prevent this from going the way of cannabis, and that's in fact how the Canadian Psychedelic Association was formed as well. It was a group of about 32 people, all who had worked with psychedelics for the last 5 years, who saw what happened when cannabis legalization happened, and we got together more than a year ago now and said, you know, how can we prevent this from happening? So Spencer, I know this is an issue that's near and dear to your heart as well. Do you want to maybe touch in on that first?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for bringing this up, Trevor. I certainly think it's important that if you're going to bring these substances out into, into the world, that you're building them around both systems that we already have in place, and then building new systems for them as well. And certainly a system we have in place is one where doctors and therapists are able to treat people. When I see what's happening in the stock market, I guess, with new companies IPOing all the time, promising huge, making massive promises like cannabis did as well. The question is like, where's the value that you're going to add that we can't already extract ourselves? There are so many healers out there, and doctors and therapists, and people who can use psychedelics, which don't need to be expensive, which don't need to, and I should say plant medicines as well, that don't need to be used, over and over and over again, like a pharmaceutical. Some of these are one-time use, and most of the value is added by the person doing the actual therapeutic work, and by the individual who's doing the therapy for themselves and letting go. So I'm not exactly sure where the huge promises are for profits and returns. I think that this will, in fact, empower a lot of the people that are already doing healing, such as our nurses and our doctors and therapists and shamans and healers out there who have been doing this for a long time. However, I don't want to completely knock on the private industry too, because they are incredibly important at the same time. They will get a lot of people access, and there are a lot of companies that are doing a great job of that. Some of them, sponsoring the work that we're all doing here, and they see that people need spaces, and doctors need training, and someone's got to create these medicines, and they've got to grow them. So it's almost a double-edged sword in that sense. You know, I think we as or I would say everyone who's on this call, listening, and government and policymakers, everyone who has a voice should be speaking out about what they think is right in the industry and supporting those things. And we shouldn't get too hasty thinking that, you know, this is going to provide a whole bunch of monetary value. I think it's going to heal a lot of people, and that's even more important.
Beautiful.
Larry, can I jump on that one too?
Yeah, please. And Spencer, I'm going to bring Salimeh back to wrap us up here. So I just want to thank you so much for your work. Send my love to Bruce. Give him a big hug next time you see him. And everybody, let's tweet our health minister and make sure that these people get access to these medicines. Do whatever we can. So thank you so much, Spencer.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Salimeh, Larry, and Carlos. It was great to meet you. And just one last thing I want to say here too, that I think you guys have spot on, is this is about compassion. And it's not about, you know, it's not necessarily just about the research that's out there. I think in our case, the minister just needs to grant this on compassionate grounds out of love for these people who are asking for something at the end of their life. So thank you so much for getting our message heard and our voices. And I appreciate the work you're all doing. Thank you.
Beautiful. Awesome. Thank you, sir. And Carlos and Larry, I know you guys really specifically kind of took the decriminalization route and not the legalization route. So please speak on that topic.
Yeah, and I just want to thank Spencer and all the work he's doing, and kudos for the work, and I hope he can get tremendous support. You know, I think if as a community, broad community, global community, we could all galvanize around medical research and scientific research and medical applications, clinical applications, community-based healing. We want to be really cognizant of the fact that anytime we create special interest groups, and I've seen this in government, I've seen this in being in the world of capitalism, they tend to advocate for their self-interest. So that's why profiteering is so important to watch. So again, medical research, clinical, scientific research, community-based, but I will kind of go out and say that corporate interest and for-profit motive very much concerns me, simply because it is the for-profit motive that drives it, and so what's left on the sidelines of that is the compassion and the love. And I know from having in the past been a cannabis user, as opposed to somebody who healed from mushrooms, that they're completely different experiences in terms of the support that you need. Had I just had a mushroom experience and found no community, I'd still try to be figuring out what to do with the experience. Community is so important for integration. Integration is so important for healing. Community and integration is so important, getting to that next step of understanding the importance of reciprocity. It's a process. And corporate America or corporate profiteering won't offer us that. In fact, what will happen is the only way that you can kind of keep making money from this will be to offer it in microdoses in a way where you're not getting the full healing effect, but you're just going and refilling the microdose experience. In cannabis, because I was involved in cannabis since 2000 when our council office actually passed regulations in Oakland for creating dispensaries, medical dispensaries, and then I became a lobbyist, and then I became an operator of a dispensary, and then got out of it. What we saw early on was that the way that we sold this bill of goods, so to speak, for passing cannabis, and granted we were all new into passing regulations around plants. We hadn't done anything for hundreds of years. Well, we didn't have to do anything for decades, but so passing the decriminalization and legalization was about pitching to local governments what's in it for them. And so we pitched that by saying you're going to make all these taxes, so you should legalize cannabis because of the taxes you're going to make, which meant profit, that we had to sell the profit motive to ourselves and to the rest of the world. So that was mistake number one. Mistake number two was that then we felt like we really had to create new regulations. This must be really dangerous because it's illegal, right? So let's create a bunch of regulations. And we created a bunch of new agency approaches and all kinds of new complexity. And so the second mistake we made was to make regulations complex. And that led to the third problem with cannabis, which was then it became this really great opportunity for venture capital to control the game because it's too expensive and too complex for the average person to get and do their own cultivation, to do their own manufacturing, because it's so highly regulated. And that pushed out, in Oakland anyways, people of color, people who had gone to prison for cannabis use, who now couldn't even get in, who now were stopped from doing cultivation, even though that was their livelihood 20 years ago. And it just became really, really nasty. And the beneficiaries of all of this were venture capital and government. And the losers were the people who had paid the heaviest price in cannabis. And so we said in Decrim Nature, we said, let's just not do any of that. Let's just not make it for profit. Let's not complexify regulations, and let's keep venture capital out of Oakland. And let's not make any bones about it. Let's give ourselves a 5 or 10 year runway to try to get it right from the bottom up. And that's the experiment that we have here. So people are all the time calling me or calling friends of mine and saying, hey, look, we're running a venture capital firm on mushrooms. We'd like to talk to Carlos, or they'll call me directly. And I'll say, unless you're planning on giving money away to groups or being philanthropic, you don't need to call me because we're not open for business in Oakland for that. We're trying to figure out how to support those people who really need support from plant healing work. And I'm hoping that our council will hold that line for as long as possible to let us figure out how to heal from the bottom up again.
This is incredible. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
This is incredible to hear because, again, so inspirational that you guys have created a protection, at least around Oakland, and set it up as an example. Because, as you may have known, what we went through with legalization in Canada regarding cannabis has been a very tragic, for me, a very tragic story. Because, again, back in the late 90s, there were cases of patients, exactly like what Spencer and Dr. Tobin and the group are going through. It's based on patients needing access to the medicine that they allowed patients to grow their own medicine. And that was like with the Allard case and the Parker case, and then the Cannabis Act was instilled. So patients were able to have a certain amount. But once legalization happened in 2018, that got taken away, and now people are down to 4 plants. And we all know, based on some of the chronic illnesses or cancer, 4 plants is not going to do it. And again, you're taking away the sovereignty and the connection that we as individuals have to plants, and that is our birthright for when we come onto this planet. And no other human should navigate that for us. I feel that we've come into a certain place in our evolution that we can choose. If I want to have a macro dose or a micro dose with these plants and have support around it, that should be my choice. So for cannabis, unfortunately, our dispensaries got shut down. Some of our dispensaries were actually healing spaces where there was massage, the apothecaries, there was access to a chiropractor. What I envisioned would be, clinics of the future. But unfortunately, they got shut down, and now you have these sterile government-controlled centers that look like the Apple Store. You go in and everything's just white, and you can't even smell the flowers anymore. You can't even see and touch the flower anymore. So it's so separated from what we had before, and they call this legalization. And so I am all for decriminalization because, again, this is the chance for our facilitators. Me and Trevor are both supporting individuals, him with Iboga, me with psilocybin, in going into deep dives with medicine. And we ourselves and our collective of facilitators need to have support so that our work can continue without fear, so that our work can continue with safety as the number one piece in the container. And so I just get so inspired when I hear you guys talk about the fact that, venture capital at this point is not welcome into the Oakland space. And this is actually about access and about healing. So thank you, really, really thank you for that inspiration, holding that with your whole tribe and the government officials. My next question, and I know we have some other really great questions from the friends online, but one is around, and maybe I missed this as I went off line for a bit, what is next as far as the next big moves for you in Decriminalization Nature US? What's going on with Chicago? Because that would be it would be monumental to have a city like Chicago come on board. And what about places like Dallas, Texas? What's opening up maybe in the southern region of the U.S.?
Larry, maybe I'll go local and then hand it off to you, national and international. Some
Perfect.
good stuff happening international. So at the local, and the whole thing for Decrim Nature from the very beginning is just build models. Let's not try to conquer the world. Let's just conquer ourselves and create some good models. And if people like them in other places, they can replicate them. That's been the basic gist of how we've approached things. And we did that with the resolution. People liked it. We're doing that also with our Oakland Community Healing Initiative, which is our own model for having this container that we talked about for community healing. And so the model there, again, building something that is easily replicable in other cities. And it's really simple. It's just our city council would offer the legal protections as long as groups opt in and accept certain guidelines of safety that we develop as community that the council signs off on. If you agree to those, you opt in, and as opting in, you automatically get legal protections from the city, meaning that if the feds or anybody comes in to prosecute, that there's a legal defense structure there built by the city and then hopefully the state of California. And we saw that happen with Harborside when the Harborside was under federal prosecution and investigation, and they went after the landlord to do a federal seizure. The city of Oakland, city attorney's office, actually stepped forward to offer legal defense to Harborside and the landlord to prevent the federal seizure. And then at that point, the federal dollars were deemed depleted that were allocated for that region. And then finally, they just broke away and said, forget it, this is too expensive, it's not worth it. And Melinda Haig sort of walked away from that. So for now, until we get it descheduled at the federal level, then that's a way that the local communities can continue to do healing with plants, is to have that protection. So very basic, very simple. Community organizations would bring in their members and the community organization is a container, not formally as a 501c3, but as an organization of people, offer the container to people who are vulnerable, who step in to get the healing into that container, so they have community to pursue that with. And then we would have very trained facilitators, trained from indigenous curanderos and healers, but also underground facilitators that have done it a long time, would offer the healing to the community, and then the government would protect. So that's the basic model, really simple, not a lot of words in it, and our whole hope is to pass that by September of this year, if not October. COVID threw a little wrench into that process. But we're now starting conversations with council to get that passed, and if other communities like it, then we'll hopefully replicate that model.
Great.
What do you think, Larry?
Perfect. Yeah, no, and I just want to touch on something previously too that was an interesting conversation, which was talking about self-agency, ability to heal, ability to grow your own, and we hear a lot of things from people that have cluster headaches, other things, and how do they get access to them? I can't go to a therapist's office when a cluster headache problem comes or something else like that, but this can help them. Also, the dynamic that's set up currently, which is that if it's, same thing with cannabis, if it's not medical, then it's just kind of staring at your navel. It's recreational. You're playing around, right? And really sort of expand that conversation out. So we're talking about a lot of different things outside of just medical and recreational, spiritual, educational, creativity, these types of things. So having this broader access to being able to grow your own also allows different opportunities for the ways or the perspectives in which you actually, sort of the intentions behind some of the medicine work. In terms of our national outreach, I think that it's been really, obviously, as Carlos mentioned, everything kind of slowed down in terms of Corona and COVID, and nobody's, both in terms of being able to actually be in person at a city council meeting, and also many city councils are just very busy right now with a lot of other things. Right at the last, I think January 28th, basically the last moment we had, Santa Cruz passed the resolution to decriminalize nature. So that was pretty great. On that same day, Chicago was supposed to have their public safety meeting, but they got shut down because of a Corona case. And then again, slightly after that, I believe they're supposed to have another meeting that was stopped. So currently, I think in terms of process, Chicago is about 2 or 3 hearings away from completing, or at least getting to the final vote. The next one is the Public Safety Commission. Then they have some public comments on that, and then the final vote would happen after that. So it's in process. I know that they're working hard behind the scenes and sort of strategizing how they'll put together their sort of testimony and all that. So that's been pretty great. A lot of other cities are doing this as well. I think over the Corona break, we had about 25 different cities we talked to, spoke with. Some of them are different levels and ranges in terms of where they're ready to do. Places like, and also now we have to sort of figure out what's going to be different. Minneapolis with the defunding of the police, does that change things for, decriminalization? Are we now looking at community building, since that would now technically be decriminalized given some of these sort of new approaches? But Minneapolis was getting close, Ann Arbor was getting close, Chicago was getting close, a bunch of places, Portland was doing some work, a bunch of places in Washington, places on the East Coast. You mentioned Dallas. Dallas is doing something, it's a little bit slower there. They're definitely trying to make things happen, but each state has a slightly different system where some people can sort of petition or do ballot initiatives or go to the city council. Dallas has to go through the city council, and there's some issues. Same with DC around where the expenditures go. So it's kind of tricky, but they're working hard to make that happen. They're making all the connections. They're talking to the city attorney's office, that type of thing. And their approach is slightly different too, because they're also including cannabis, and they're also including salvia as plants that are on there, because I believe salvia is not legal in Dallas, at least, and cannabis as well. So really sort of expand that a little bit to a larger range. Other places, I think there's another spot, maybe I forgot where it was, that was looking into that as well. Internationally speaking, we've obviously, there's this great crew in Canada that's has us on these webinars and things. So, but also, as Carlos said, we have some folks in Mexico that are doing this work, some folks in Santiago, Chile that are looking into this. We had some outreach from Ireland and France, and even some download packet from Moscow. So this is reached across the planet, which is pretty amazing. And really, this is, policy is one thing, educational campaign is another thing. So if we're getting education out, if we're bringing this to a bunch of different cities, if we're sort of helping people, supporting people, teach people in their local community, that's a big win, because, that's what we need to do to start this process. And as things move, as things open back up, assuming everything doesn't get shut back down again, we're assuming hopefully 4 to 5 different cities by the end of 2020 will decriminalize nature. If not, it will be shortly after that. But it's a really unusual time right now, so we have to be really flexible with what's going on and what to be aware of, and how to sort of turn on a dime in terms of strategy and approach. But so far, I think it's been really beautiful to see a lot of the things that we're learning are needed because of the corona. Local, supply chain, community, people that are able to engage with their city council, like all these things that we've already kind of implemented into our sort of ethos are things that we're finding can actually be really helpful now, because it's a little bit trickier for like an Oregon or Washington D.C. to have to go get signatures now because of the inability to contact people. So it turns out that to some degree this has been kind of a good approach given our current circumstances, and things will change. But I think once that happens, once the Oakland Community Healing Initiative that Carlos was just talking about a moment ago happens, I think you'll really see that momentum build back up, and people are excited for change. People want change. People are interested in healing. Healing work, both psychologically, trauma-wise, also with spiritual healing, those types of things. And I think people are ready to have this conversation now.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, guys. I'm going to pass it off to Salimeh to wrap us up here. I'll just once again say thank you. You guys are, I think I said in some interview that you're 2 of my favorite humans ever right now. So thank you so much for the work you've done. It's exceptional. And thank you for sharing your wisdom with Canada here and the world. We've got 80 people who have been around watching this so far, probably more on Facebook, and we're going to post this on our Facebook page to share with the world ongoing. So thank you, everybody. And Salimeh.
Yeah, thank you both so much, and an extension to your teams. This is so exciting for us to see this initiative. And maybe as a final few words, we know our crew in Canada is strong, and we're coming together and we're connecting more across this vast nation. But what would be your, message of inspiration if people want to get involved? What is one thing that you could suggest?
Larry.
Me first, okay. So just on the very logistical, technical sides, we have social media accounts at Decriminalize Nature, Facebook, Instagram, that type of thing. If you want to email us, it's at decrimnature@gmail.com. And that from there, we can send you an info packet, which has all the resolution documents, all the information you need, our stances, some educational frameworks, all that stuff can come, as well as like an intro email So if you just want to use that as an educational source, that's a really great way to get some good information there. And I think in general, if you're in a community and you haven't really seen this happen yet, or you're still looking for community, a good way is to put together integration circles. It's really minor in terms of effort. You can put together a group of 10 people, you get that kind of vibe going. And something about an integration circle that's great, just connecting people, it makes people feel like, okay, I'm not the only one here. And then they tell 2 or 3 more people. And sort of that's the way, on a very small level, something easy that everyone can do. And you don't need to be sort of a therapist to sit in an integration circle. We're all just kind of learning and hearing each other's stories. So make it more of a storytelling thing. Bring educational events if you can. Let people know that you're out there. Put some flyers on the wall. You can do some guerrilla advertising with stickers everywhere, T-shirts like this. So just fun ways to get people to have that conversation. And once that conversation starts, that really can get things moving, because next thing you're like, oh, this person knows this person, and then you've really created a network.
Yeah, and to jump on that as well, the education component. Start your own group in your own city, and if you're intimidated by the government engagement process, then put that on hold for a second, but just engage. It could be setting up meetings with your leadership, your city local leadership, or local churches, local organizations, and just hold seminars, spread the word, share the information, share the scientific information, and we'll make a bunch of stuff available to you all. And then when you get enough confidence, just engage with your local elected officials. A lot of what we're doing is about rebuilding our own relationship to our democracy, which you Canadians know here in the US, we're struggling with that a bit. So it's about reestablishing an understanding that the government is our government. And so looking and engaging with our elected officials is an important thing for us to do in terms of taking action with this wonderful information that we have. And then coming up soon next year, we're going to get into how do we develop bottom-up local economic models that help, with the growing and the gathering and the gifting. How do we create models that generate revenue that support our local communities, so that people who go through the healing process can now have housing, can get good food, can build sustainable jobs. And so that's the next phase of this. We're going to hold a big retreat, an international and national Decriminalization Nature retreat next June 4th, 2020. You're all invited. We're going to have it in Santa Cruz, California, and we're going to just talk about all of this and come up with a big plan. So get involved now, build your leadership, and come see us in Santa Cruz in June of 2020 when we figure out how we're going to solve a lot of riddles.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much for that. And again, for everyone who's watching and supporting and doing the good work out there, please visit us at the Canadian Psychedelic Association website, as well as decriminalize.ca, and we'll be releasing more and more information about what's going on in different cities across Canada as well. Just like Larry and Carlos mentioned, they've been generous in sharing this kit with us, as well as the resolutions and the wording. And we are, we're going to start activating different nodes across Canada where there's already energy, where a lot of our community members are already doing the good work. And parallel to the federal petition, we're also talking to the MPs, as Trevor mentioned, and because of the opioid overdose crisis right here in Vancouver, we are going to connect back with our own city councillors. We had the initial meeting on September 11th, and we are going to revisit that because many of those incredible city councillors are in line and aligned with what this movement is all about. And so now that COVID has kind of calmed down, we are going to revisit that conversation. So stay tuned. Thank you for all your support as far as the donations and just the love and the emails. And we hope to continue to do this good work together. Thank you again so much, Carlos. Thank you so much, Larry. Thank you, Spencer, for being here. And we'll update you on this, on Spencer and Dr. Tobin's case as well. They might be going to court beginning of July. We're hoping that it doesn't go there, but you can follow Lori and Thomas's stories on the short YouTube videos. We'll link that onto our website as well. They're incredibly touching stories, and here we are in unity and trust and love. Thank you all so much.
Beautiful. Thanks, everybody. Go team.
Thank you.
Good night.